Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something I think is so important. It really is kind of a foundation for how we think about society and how it should function. And we're talking about individualism versus progressivism. We found this really cool video on YouTube from the Misesmedia channel.
Okay.
And it's called straight up Individualism versus Progressivism. And it got me thinking, how do these two different philosophies, how do they actually, play out in our lives?
Yeah, how do they manifest?
Like in our families, in our education systems.
Absolutely.
And so the video starts out by taking us all the way back
Okay.
to the late 19th century.
Wow.
And we're introduced to this guy, Henry Adams, and, like the Adams family.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he was a really early advocate for progressivism. But what I thought was really interesting is that he saw America's, emphasis on individual freedom as a roadblock to building like a perfect society. And he believed that people needed to be kind of guided, molded, toward becoming like ideal citizens and, using carefully planned social policies to do that.
Interesting. So like engineered, kind of?
Yeah. So it's like whose vision is going to win out, the individual or this kind of like greater societal vision?
Right. And this is really reflective of like a core tenet of progressivism that like the society is the fundamental unit.
Okay.
And that government should kind of have this leading role in shaping the future.
So it's like a top-down approach.
Yeah. The government's like steering the ship.
Exactly. So then we fast forward like 60 years.
Okay.
And we're introduced to Friedrich Hayek. And he's an economist who really passionately defended individualism. He was all about families and communities having autonomy and people working together, not because they're told to, but because it's like
Mutually beneficial.
right, voluntarily.
Yeah, exactly. So Hayek is like pushing back against this idea of big government, But how does that actually work in practice? Like,
Yeah.
how do you create order without like a strong central authority? Well, Hayek was a big believer in this idea of spontaneous order. It's this idea that order
Okay.
and progress can emerge naturally from the countless interactions and choices that individuals make.
So give me an example.
Yeah, sure. Think of like a bustling marketplace. There's no one person controlling
Right.
every single transaction, right? But somehow supply and demand find a balance, goods get produced, and people find what they need.
And that's a great analogy. But, doesn't it kind of assume that everyone's starting from the same point? Like, what about people who are disadvantaged or marginalized from the start?
Right. And that's one of the criticisms of, that pure individualism.
Okay.
Is that it can lead to inequality and those that need support kind of get left behind.
So you're saying it's not like black and white.
Right. It's more nuanced. It's more of a spectrum.
Yeah. How much individual freedom versus how much, collective responsibility.
Right.
And the video then highlights some key distinctions between progressivism and individualism.
Okay.
And I think it would be helpful just to clearly define those for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely.
So progressivism sees society as the main building block, with the government setting the rules and then expert bureaucrats making a lot of the decisions.
Yeah, so like the bureaucrats would be government officials that specialize in specific areas like transportation or education. And progressives believe that these experts are best equipped to kind of develop and implement policies for the common good.
Okay, so individualism, on the other hand, really focuses on the individual as the core. It emphasizes personal choice, problem solving at the local level,
Right.
and order arising naturally from all these interactions.
Exactly. So it's about empowering individuals and communities to make decisions that affect their lives more directly.
And the video really dives into Hayek's argument, which centers around three key questions, incentives, knowledge, and responsibility. And so he believed that when individuals have the freedom to make choices, they're more likely to be motivated to act in their own self-interest.
Right, because they're directly impacted by the consequences of their decisions.
He also argued that individuals have the most intimate knowledge of their own needs and circumstances.
Yeah.
So they're in a better position to make those decisions that are going to benefit them directly.
Exactly. And a great example of that is homeschooling. People choose to homeschool their kids because they feel like they have a better understanding of their kids' learning styles and needs.
That's a perfect example of individualist principles in action.
Yeah.
So to illustrate these contrasting approaches,
Okay.
the video brings up a great example. Infrastructure. Things like roads, power grids, things we all rely on.
Mm-hmm.
So progressives tend to favor this idea of shared responsibility
Okay.
for these essential services because they believe that everyone should contribute through taxes to make sure that these systems are maintained and accessible to everyone.
That makes sense.
Yeah. What's the individualist perspective on that?
Well, they often lean towards privatization. They believe that individuals and private companies are more efficient and innovative
Okay.
in providing those services.
So instead of the government building and maintaining roads, you might have private companies competing to offer toll roads, for example.
Exactly, or communities might pool their resources to develop their own local infrastructure.
That's fascinating. And then the video goes on to talk about education, which is where I think things get really interesting.
Yeah.
It poses this question: who do you trust to make the best decisions about your child's education?
That's a big one.
Yeah. So progressives, they generally support, a standardized public education system
Okay.
because they believe it ensures equal access to quality education for all children.
So like a centralized system
Yeah.
with a set curriculum.
Yeah, exactly. Individualists, on the other hand, they advocate for school choice.
Okay.
So parents can select from a variety of options: private schools, charter schools, homeschooling, because they believe that this competition,
Yeah.
leads to more tailored education that really
Right.
meets the needs of individuals.
So you might have parents opting for a traditional school environment, while others want a more progressive, hands-on approach.
And some might just decide to educate their kids at home.
Right, and tailor the curriculum to their specific interests and learning styles.
It's really amazing how these philosophies lead to such different approaches
It really is.
to something so fundamental as education.
And this debate continues to play out in so many areas of our lives: healthcare, environmental policy, how we structure our communities.
So to wrap up today, we explored the core principles of individualism and progressivism. We saw how they shape our views on decision-making, responsibility, and the role of government.
It's a complex issue
It is.
with no easy answers.
But as we, kind of navigate these complex issues, it's important to understand these underlying philosophies.
For sure.
So if you think about your own life, the future you envision for your family, think about where you fall. On this spectrum, do you lean more towards individual liberty, freedom of choice, or do you value a more collective approach? Where do you fall?
That's the question.
That's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.